Hi, welcome to the Landlord Association South Africa, also known as LASA. Please hit the subscribe button so you can keep up with all landlord news and guidance in South Africa. You can help us out by clicking the like button. The legal process of buying property in South Africa involves multiple steps, legal documents, and professionals such as conveyancers and estate agents. Below is a step-by-step guide to ensure a smooth property transaction. Once a buyer finds a suitable property, they submit an offer to purchase, OTP, to the seller. This is a legally binding contract that outlines the agreed purchase price, payment terms, cash or mortgage, deposit, if applicable, suspensive conditions, e.g. subject to bond approval, occupation date and occupational rent, if applicable, and transfer and occupation conditions. Once both parties sign the OTP, the sale becomes legally binding. If the buyer requires financing, they apply for a home loan, bond, through a bank or lender. The process includes credit and affordability assessment, property valuation by the bank, loan approval, and signing of bond documents. Buyers can use bond originators to secure the best interest rates. A conveyancer, property transfer attorney, is appointed, usually by the seller, to handle the legal transfer of ownership. The process includes drafting the transfer documents, obtaining necessary compliance certificates, electrical, plumbing, gas, beetle, etc., and ensuring all rates, taxes, and levies are paid. The buyer must pay transfer costs before registration. These include transfer duty, if applicable, payable to SARS, conveyancing fees set by the Law Society, and deeds office fees for registration. If the property is below 1,100,000 rands, no transfer duty is payable. The conveyancer prepares and lodges the following documents at the deeds office: transfer deed, bond registration documents, if applicable, and clearance certificates. This process can take 7 to 10 working days. Once the deeds office approves the transaction, the property is legally transferred to the buyer, the buyer's bond is registered, if applicable, the purchase price is paid to the seller, and the buyer receives ownership rights. After registration, the seller must vacate the property unless otherwise agreed, and the buyer takes occupation. Buyers should verify property ownership, title deed status, and potential restrictions. The seller must provide compliance certificates, electrical, gas, water, beetle, etc. If the buyer moves in before registration, they may need to pay occupational rent. This process typically takes 8 to 12 weeks, depending on delays in bond approval, compliance certificates, or the deeds office. Would you like more details on any specific step? The transfer process typically takes 8 to 12 weeks, depending on factors such as bond approval, compliance certificates, and the deeds office processing time. The seller usually appoints the conveyancer, but the buyer pays for the conveyancing fees. Buyers must budget for the purchase price, transfer duty, if applicable, payable to SARS, conveyancing fees, bond registration costs, if applicable, deeds office registration fees, and pro rata rates and levies. A deposit is not mandatory but is often required by sellers, usually 5 to 10% of the purchase price. It is held in a trust account until registration. Transfer duty is a tax payable to SARS based on the property's value. Properties below 1,100,000 rands are exempt from transfer duty. Yes, foreigners can buy property in South Africa, but loan-to-value, LTV ratios are lower. Typically, a 50% deposit is required for mortgage financing. An OTP is a legally binding contract between the buyer and seller outlining the terms of the sale. Once signed by both parties, it cannot be withdrawn without consequences. If the sale is subject to bond approval, a suspensive condition in the OTP, and the bond is declined, the sale can be cancelled without penalties. The seller must provide compliance certificates for electrical, plumbing, gas, if applicable, beetle in coastal areas, and electric fence, if applicable. If the buyer moves in before transfer, they may have to pay the seller an occupational rent, which is usually a percentage of the purchase price. Once signed, the OTP is legally binding. However, cancellation may be possible within the cooling-off period, for properties under 250,000 rands, or by mutual agreement, subject to penalties. A bond originator negotiates with multiple banks to secure the best interest rate for your home loan, often at no extra cost to you. On registration, the property legally transfers to the buyer. The seller receives payment, and the buyer takes ownership and can collect the keys. Delays can occur due to bond approval delays, outstanding compliance certificates, deeds office backlog, and rates clearance issues. To ensure a smooth property transaction, get pre-approved for a home loan. Work with a reliable estate agent. Read the OTP carefully. Ensure the seller obtains all compliance certificates and use a reputable conveyancer.